Welcome to Al-Hala, a hidden village in the mountains of Ras Al-Khayma. We are here in one of the two main accesses to Al-Hala, a wadi which leads into the village itself. And here we are at the entrance of Al-Hala, which was fortified. What you can see here on both sides are the remains of a large wall, nearly 3 meters high, which originally closed the whole wadi. Most probably there was an opening in the bottom to let the water through during the rain, but otherwise this was completely closed. So we can talk about a fortified village, because this was a defense structure, a wall which prevented anyone from entering. The wall, as you can see, is built with quite large stones, with 2 rows of stones and a filling of gravel in the center. And on this side only little has been remained, and the rest was washed away from the wadi in the last 300 to 400 years after the village was not used any longer. But originally this was a line of defense against any possible attacker who wanted to raid this village. Why do we call them hidden villages? Because, like Hala here in the background, they are built into the mountains, not visible from anywhere from the lower ground or the coastline. They were hidden away for some reason. We know now that Al-Hala was built in the 17th century, in a time when everything was very unsecure. It was after the end of the Kingdom of Hormuz, it was after the end of the Portuguese influence, it was after 1633, and in this period of time the whole of the Gulf was very unsecure. Every year the Portuguese tried to come back into the Gulf, raiding the coast, plundering coastal villages to try to take some of their riches away. The Omanis were fighting against the Iranians on the other side, so there were raids as well. And the people didn't feel any more secure in their palm gardens. So they built villages away into the mountains. And Al-Hala is one example of these villages. It's today at the edge of Wadi Hajil, which is not very far from the palm gardens in Shimel. And from here, people could go down back into their palm gardens in about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, which was an acceptable time. And in times of danger or in the evening, they went back to this village where they lived. And the village is quite large. We have 86 compounds with every single compound having one large house for a family to live in. So we can really talk about quite a large and extensive forage. I have shown you already the entrance was fortified to one side, and there's a cliff towards Wadi Hajil with another entrance which was easily to defend as well. So people were hidden away here and built their houses, and we will see with terraces, retaining walls and quite solid built houses in which the people lived. So these 86 compounds are really distributed over the wadi, over this bowl. When you look to the back where this new visitor platform has been built, this is the edge towards Wadi Hakil, from where there is a cliff down to the wadi, and the houses have been built really on every side of the bowl, quite evenly distributed along the edges and in the center of it, and really down to the wadi of which we came. This is a quite good example of one of the large houses, of which we have more than 80 here in Al-Hala, and the way they were built. As you can see, they used quite large stone blocks, roughly hewn, so they give a straight front, and at least 2 up to 3 meters high. What is very important is that they used these stones without any mortar, just putting them on top of each other and using smaller stones, as you can see everywhere here, to anchor the big stones into the wall. And What is not preserved here, but when you look on the inside, it's much better preserved on the inside. Everything was covered with a layer of mud or silt to really fill all the gaps and to insulate the house, to keep the warmth in winter time and to prevent the heat in summertime of going into the room. What is very important is when you come towards the roof, you have a row of large slabs. Here are 3 still in situ and another one on this side, which are projecting out quite 20 centimeters or even more. And these stones were built to prevent the rain of washing down the mud layer which was put against the wall. On top of that you had 1 or 2 rows of stones which carried the roof. The roof was made from beams, probably from local wood or palm trees, which they brought from Schimmel. On top of that a layer of sand and gravel, and covered on top, so you have to think about 2 more rows of stones which kept the roof together. And that's how every of these houses were built. Some of them, these projecting stone slabs are still visible. This one is very nicely built with stones. Others are a little bit more irregular. As you can see, there seems to have been no mason, no central mason. It seems to be everybody built his house or this house with the help of others. And every wall is slightly different from the other. To build houses on the slope, the people of Halle had to put a large effort into building these houses, because you need a platform. You need not only space for your house, but also for a courtyard and your secondary house. So you had to cut into the rock and you had to fill the other side and build large retaining walls like this one, or on the houses which are coming here on the slope, which is really a big effort for just building a single house to have a retaining wall of the height of more than 2 meters. But it is very normal for many of these houses, and it shows that this is not really something which was done very fast or quick. It is really done in a long and very heavy work, which everybody was probably involved, and community helped each other. I'm standing here in one of the 2 mosques of Al-Hala. And this mosque was never covered. It was never built with high walls. It is more or less only marked as a mosque on the ground. You probably had a wall a little bit higher here on the side towards the mihrab, and you can see here, sadly quite collapsed, the remains of the mihrab. But the walls were never high, they were really just a marking. So it was an open mosque. And it might have been used as an open mosque. Like many mosques which we do have in the palm gardens, they have a closed building and next to it an open prayer platform. Something like this which you use in the early mornings, to use for the last prayers in the evening. But generally this is an open ground, and when you turn around and you look outside, you can see there's also a large flat area on the outside. So we think that this was not only used for morning or evening prayers, but also as a prayer ground for Eid, so as an Eid Masala, where you do have really the large area in front of it and further between the houses where people could pray in the early morning during the Eid prayers. So quite big, and originally only a wall on the front side towards the mihrab, the rest open for the public. Here we do have a typical compound, and many of the compounds here in Al-Hala were quite similar. The center is the large house which is more or less the living quarter of the family, and very often built and raised on a platform to be above ground and away from the water. In the same way, like described, with the walls and then the stones which are projecting out and the roof on top of that. But there we're part of a larger compound, and you can see here the walls of this compound, and very often at the side or the other end a secondary building, not as big as the house itself, and never very high walls, so it was not closed. It was built like this, and it might have been a kitchen area, we don't know. When you walk inside, you see there is a large courtyard, because this originally has been a courtyard. And here in this case you even have a small wall which divides the courtyard from the secondary building, which you do not have everywhere, and as a speciality on this side a small platform, which might have been used for grinding wheat and barley or for any other household activity. And then the entrance into the building, into the house and the living quarters. Quite often you can see that the walls of the compound are not connecting directly to the walls of the house, but leave small gaps on both sides. Interesting is also that you can see that sometimes compounds have two entrances. We have one entrance very clearly here on this side, and when you turn around there's another entrance on the other side. So all these compounds were quite accessible. We are standing in front of the second mosque of Al-Hala, and this mosque originally was really closed. It was built like any of the houses, and that it really was a mosque is only visible in the mihrab, which has been very nicely built here in the direction of Mecca. There is also here open area in front of the mosque, so that probably during Friday prayers a large number of people could listen to the Friday prayer. What is quite important is that this mosque is clearly built together with the village in the 17th century, making this mosque one of the oldest known in the United Arab Emirates, because we can clearly date it into the 17th century. This house is very special because it's the only house where we did find some rock carvings. Rock carvings in the stones on this side of the building only. And when you come nearer, you can see here are 3 stones with rock carvings. Then there's another stone over there, a flat plate with rock carvings. And every of the rock carvings is the same. It looks like there's a horse with a rider on top, or a donkey with a rider on top, which is very difficult to say. And there's another flat stone on this side with more of the same rock carvings. But the interesting thing is, as you can see here, very, very clearly, you can see the rider and the figure on top. Here's another rider and the figure on top. And you can see it here. This seems to be just only an animal, or it is broken. So it looks like it's all the same. We don't know why they are here, because as you have to imagine, all these houses were covered with mud or clay to protect or close all the openings and form smoother surface on the outside. So these rock carvings were not visible. And this is the second question. Where are the stones coming from? Probably these stones were coming from a place where there were rock carvings, and they just cut it and brought it to here. And the question is, where are the stones coming from? The thing is, inside this bowl here, we did not find any quarry. And when you think 86 large buildings, plus a large amount of retaining walls and platforms, you need a huge number of stones, but we do not find a place with a quarry. So the question is, where are the stones coming from? And it might well possible that the stones were brought from Wadi Hajil. So from down Wadi Hajil they were brought up here, and there might have been an area with rock carvings which they cut while they were building this house, and they just put them in here, but they might not have been visible when the house was finished. This is the other end of Al-Hala towards Wadi Hajil, and we really have a more or less vertical cliff on this side, which is a fantastic defense position, and there's only a very small footpath along the cliff front on this side, which enables you to come up to the village. And this is probably the way everybody was taking day and night to go into Wadi Hajil, to bring water from Wadi Hajil, or go towards the palm gardens in Shimel, which are only away maybe 30 to 40 minutes for the people to walk. And some of the rocks here which seem to indicate that even on this side must have been a wall which defended this side. So even when somebody would have tried to attack from this position, it would have been nearly impossible to go into the village. So it was a fortified, it was really a very, very nicely fortified place from both sides. And people felt quite safe in Al-Hala. And this is very, very typical for these hidden villages, that they are built away from the palm gardens, but still in a way that the palm gardens were easy to reach in a time which was acceptable, and that you find defense structures like walls or even sewers in other places which were used by the people in times of danger. This is the end of our tour through Al-Hala, which is still a very nice, peaceful and quiet place, hidden away from the everyday life of Ras Al-Khayma. We don't know how long this village was used. There are changes, so it must have been more than one generation, because some houses have been removed, new houses have been built. So we have to assume that for several generations these houses were used. But we think that with the rise of the Qawasim in the middle of the 18th century, and with a peaceful time after that, these villages lost their function as a safe haven, and people could go back into their palm gardens without the fear of being attacked by pirates. So we think that these villages might have been used for maybe a century, maximum a century and a half, and are really a very important part of the historical heritage of the Emirate of Ras Al Khayma.